I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Honestly, if I could rewind the clock, I probably wouldn't have done a damn thing differently. Because that moment changed everything. Let me back up a bit. My name's Chris, and for the past 5 years, I've been best friends with Marcus. We met in college, bonded over an all-nighter and a shared hatred of group projects. And we've been tight ever since. Marcus is the kind of friend who'll help you move, lie for you in front of your ex, and split the last slice of pizza without hesitation. So yeah, we're close. That summer, Marcus invited me to spend a couple weeks at his family's cabin in upstate New York. "You need a break, man," he said. "Come chill. It's quiet, there's no Wi-Fi, and the lake's basically our backyard." Sounded like heaven. What he didn't mention, until we were halfway there, was that his younger brother, Julian, would be joining us for the second half of the trip. "Julian's just crashing for a few days," Marcus said casually, keeping his eyes on the road. "You'll like him. He's chill." I didn't say much. Julian and I had met once before, briefly, during a party at their parents' house. Back then, he'd been 18. All braces and shaggy hair, quiet and awkward around his older brother's friends. But now, he wasn't that kid anymore. Julian showed up 3 days into our stay, stepping out of a rideshare in ripped jeans and a vintage tee, his hair a little longer, jaw more defined, with this easy, cocky confidence that caught me completely off guard. He saw me on the porch, grinned, and said, "Chris, right?" I nodded. "Hey, you don't remember me, do you?" "I do," I lied, kind of. He laughed and hauled his bag inside like he owned the place. The first couple days were fine. We swam, grilled burgers, watched dumb movies. Marcus played the role of older brother, cracking jokes at Julian's expense, while Julian gave it right back. It was all very normal. But something shifted on the fourth night. Marcus had gone into town to grab more beer and forgot his phone, leaving me and Julian alone at the cabin. It was late. We were on the porch, the night air thick and still. Julian sat across from me, one leg tucked under the other, nursing a beer and watching me in that quiet way he did, like he was figuring something out. "You and Marcus ever?" he asked suddenly. I nearly choked. "What?" He smirked. "I mean, you're hot." "He's not blind," I laughed awkwardly, brushing it off. "Nah. We're just friends." Julian nodded slowly, then tilted his head. "So if you were gonna hook up with someone here," I looked at him. And he looked right back at me. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. That night, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't anything he said. It was the way he said it. The way he looked at me. Not like I was his brother's friend, but like I was something else. Like he saw right through me. And maybe that's what scared me most. I should have known better. I should have set boundaries. But the next night, everything blurred. It was after midnight. I had just come out of the shower, towel around my waist, heading back to the guest room when I realized I left my phone on the kitchen counter. I walked in, dripping water onto the floor, and there was Julian, standing there in just his boxers, rummaging through the fridge. We both froze, his eyes dropped to the towel. Mine locked on the curve of his hip, the way the fabric clung to him. Neither of us moved. I started. "So was I," he said. Then he stepped forward. And I didn't stop him. Julian stepped closer, slowly, like he was giving me a chance to back away. But I didn't move. The only sound was the soft hum of the fridge and the drip of water hitting the tile from my hair. My heart was hammering in my chest, and all I could think was, this is a bad idea. A bad, stupid, dangerous idea. But I couldn't make myself stop it. "You're dripping," he said, eyes fixed on my chest as a droplet slid down. His voice was soft, not teasing, more like a quiet observation. Then, without thinking, he reached out and wiped it away with his thumb. I flinched, not from discomfort, but from how deliberate it felt, like he was testing the line. "Julian," I said, finally. "Yeah?" "You can't." I started to say, "You can't do this." But my voice trailed off when his fingers touched my hip, right where the towel knotted. He looked up at me then, eyes steady. "Why not?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "Because you're Marcus's brother? Because I'm 10 years older? Because this will absolutely blow up in my face if it goes anywhere?" Instead, I whispered, "You don't know what you're doing." He gave a crooked smile. "I think I do." Then he leaned in. It wasn't a kiss, not exactly, just his lips brushing the edge of my jaw. Barely there, but it lit a fuse. My hand shot up, fingers closing around his wrist, and for a second, we just stood there, suspended between common sense and something else entirely. Then the front door creaked. We jumped apart like we'd been electrocuted. Julian scrambled to the fridge and pulled out a soda, cracking it open like that had been his plan all along. I backed up, trying not to trip over my own towel, grabbing my phone and retreating to my room in record time. Behind the closed door, I stood there, heart racing. What the hell was that? I sat on the edge of the bed, towels still clinging to my hips, and stared at the floor. I could still feel the heat of his hand, the ghost of his breath near my ear. Marcus walked past my door minutes later, called a tired night down the hall, and disappeared into his room. I barely slept. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that encounter, wondering if I imagined it, hoping I didn't. The next morning, Julian was already outside when I woke up, shirtless and barefoot, kicking a soccer ball on the grass. I made coffee, avoiding the porch windows, trying to act normal. Marcus emerged groggy-eyed, mumbling about needing eggs, and offered to make a grocery run. Again. As soon as his car disappeared down the road, I stepped outside. Julian looked up, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Hey!" "Hey," I said back, arms crossed over my chest. "About last night." He kicked the ball to a stop, then walked over to the steps. "I meant it." "That's not the point," I said. "You're Marcus's brother. And you're not blind," he shot back, "so don't pretend you haven't thought about it." That stopped me cold. He was right. I had. Julian stepped closer. "Look, I get it. You think this is wrong or messy, or maybe you're worried about Marcus flipping out. But I'm not a kid anymore." "I know that," I muttered. "Then don't treat me like one." He stared at me, unflinching, waiting for me to say no, for me to push him away. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at him, really looked, and said, "You have no idea how complicated this is." Julian smiled. "Then maybe you should let me help you figure it out. The thing about lines is that once you cross one, they stop looking like boundaries and start looking like invitations." I kept thinking about that after Julian said what he did on the porch. "Then maybe you should let me help you figure it out." It was bold, cocky, and exactly the kind of thing that should have made me slam the brakes. Instead, it haunted me for the rest of the day. Marcus, of course, was totally oblivious. He came back with groceries, made a huge lunch, and went on a tangent about how the lake needed a better dock. Julian played the perfect little brother, sarcastic comments, second helpings, acting like nothing was off. I kept catching his glances, though, under the table, over his drink. That same steady stare that said you felt it too. Later that afternoon, Marcus announced he was heading into town again. Some guy he knew was selling a used kayak, and he wanted to check it out. "You two cool holding down the fort?" he asked. Julian didn't even look up from his phone. "Sure." I said nothing. The second Marcus's car disappeared down the gravel path, the silence dropped heavy over the cabin. Julian was on the couch, scrolling aimlessly, and I hovered in the kitchen, pretending to reorganize the silverware drawer. After a long pause, I finally said, "You can't keep doing that." He looked up. "Doing what?" "Looking at me like that." He set the phone down. "Like, what?" "Like you know something I don't." Julian stood and walked over to the kitchen island, resting his hands on the edge. "I don't know everything," he said, voice lower now. "But I know I want you." I didn't answer. He stepped around the counter into my space and I let him. "This is a terrible idea," I muttered, not moving away. "Probably," he agreed. He didn't touch me, just stood close enough that I could feel the heat coming off him. Close enough that all I had to do was lean in. So I did. The kiss was slow, cautious, like we were testing to see if it was real. And once it was, everything else fell away. My hand slid to his waist, his fingers curled into my shirt, and for the first time in weeks, something inside me stopped buzzing. It was real, dangerous, and absolutely happening. We didn't rush. We didn't rip off clothes or stumble toward the nearest flat surface. It was slower than that, quieter, like we were both trying to memorize what it felt like. His lips were warm, his hands curious, and every time he pulled back, he looked at me like he couldn't believe I was letting him. At some point, we ended up in my room. Door closed, sunlight spilling through the blinds in soft slants. He sat on the edge of the bed, knees apart, watching me like he was daring me to come closer, so I did. We didn't say much, didn't need to. The room was heavy with everything we weren't supposed to feel, but did anyway. Every time I hesitated, Julian met me halfway. Every time I pulled back, he waited. Eventually, we were lying side by side, our bodies closed but not tangled. Just breathing, letting the moment settle between us. "I wasn't expecting this," I said quietly. He turned his head toward me. "I was." I laughed, surprised. "You really planned this?" He shrugged. "I didn't plan it. I just knew I wanted it. And you." There was something disarming about how certain he was. No games, no coy smile, just honesty. It scared the hell out of me. Before I could respond, we heard the crunch of tires on gravel. "Marcus." Julian sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Don't worry," he said. "I won't say anything." I nodded slowly, still catching my breath. As he stood to leave, he glanced over his shoulder and added, "But this isn't over." And then he was gone, the door clicking softly behind him like nothing had happened. But everything had. The door had barely clicked shut when I sat up in bed. Rubbing my face like that would somehow erase the heat still clinging to my skin. My heart was still thudding in my chest, and I could feel the ghost of Julian's lips on mine. What the hell am I doing? Outside, Marcus's car door slammed. A second later, I heard the screen door creak, then the familiar thump of him kicking off his boots in the mudroom. I stood, forced myself to breathe, and walked into the living room just as Marcus dropped a plastic-wrapped kayak paddle on the floor. "Got a good deal," he said, brushing his hands together. Guy was unloading a bunch of gear before moving to Florida. Julian, now magically reclined on the couch like he hadn't been in my bed 5 minutes ago, looked up with a grin. "Nice. Maybe now you won't keep borrowing mine." Their banter ping-ponged back and forth. I chimed in when needed, laughed in the right spots. But the whole time, my eyes kept drifting to Julian, and he knew it. Every now and then, I caught him watching me when Marcus wasn't looking, just a flicker of a glance and that smug, unreadable expression. It was maddening. That night, after dinner and beers around the fire pit, Marcus turned in early. He claimed he was wiped from the drive and, quote, too old to keep drinking past midnight. Julian and I lingered. We didn't talk much, just sat across from each other in plastic chairs, the fire throwing soft shadows on his face. The silence wasn't awkward. It was charged. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So what now?" I stared into the fire. "Now nothing." "You don't believe that?" "I want to," I admitted. He didn't push, just stood up, stretched, and said, "Okay, night." I watched him walk back into the house, the screen door creaking again behind him. I stayed out by the fire a while longer, trying to convince myself that this could still be contained. That what happened earlier was a one-time thing, a lapse in judgment, something we could both chalk up to the heat or boredom or whatever excuse made it feel less real. But it wasn't going away. Over the next few days, everything felt a little too normal. We all swam, cooked meals, played board games at the kitchen table. Marcus talked about his work drama, Julian teased him relentlessly, and I kept my mouth shut. but the tension didn't ease. Julian would accidentally brush my hand when passing me a plate, or linger a half second too long when our knees touched under the table. He never said anything in front of Marcus, never stepped out of line, but in private, he was relentless. Little looks, loaded comments. "You keep looking at me like you forgot what it felt like," he whispered one night when we passed in the hallway. I didn't respond, just kept walking, but my body betrayed me. My pulse jumped, my breath caught. He noticed. Then, the night it all came to a head, Marcus went out to visit an old friend for dinner in the next town over. Julian and I were alone again. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, trying not to think about anything. Julian walked in, leaned against the counter, and watched me in silence. "You're gonna break that plate," he said after a minute. I looked down. My grip was so tight my knuckles were white. He stepped closer. "I'm not trying to screw things up between you and Marcus. I know, but I'm not gonna pretend either. Julian," he cut me off with a kiss, not soft this time, not hesitant. Just full on, no space, no breathing room. Like he was done waiting for me to catch up. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. We made it to the couch, fumbling and breathless, half clothed, half lost. The lights were dim, the world outside completely quiet. It felt reckless, stupid, perfect. I didn't realize how long we'd been like that until the sound of the front door opening snapped me back to reality. Marcus was home. I shoved Julian off me like he was on fire. He staggered, shirt half undone, breath heavy, but said nothing. Just disappeared down the hall like it was nothing. I sat there on the couch, trying to get my shirt back on, my heart trying to punch its way out of my chest. Marcus walked in, holding leftovers in a paper bag. "You okay?" he asked, looking at me curiously. "Yeah," I said, voice thin. "Just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was spiraling. Because things weren't simple anymore. They were about to get a hell of a lot more complicated. The next morning, I woke up with that same lead weight in my chest. Guilt, excitement, fear, regret, desire. It was all tangled up so tightly I couldn't even tell where one feeling ended and the next began. Marcus was already outside fixing the new kayak mount when I made my way to the kitchen. Julian sat at the table, barefoot, coffee mug in hand, reading something on his phone like nothing had happened. He looked up at me. No smirk, no teasing, just this steady gaze that said, "We both know what we did." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. The silence between us stretched. "You good?" he finally asked. I nodded once. "You?" He took a slow sip. "Depends." I glanced toward the window where Marcus was hammering something with zero finesse. "We need to stop." Julian didn't blink. "You really want to?" "I don't have a choice." "You do." "I don't," I said firmly, but I didn't sound convinced even to myself. He sat back in his chair, folding his arms. "You think Marcus would be pissed?" I stared at him. "Seriously?" Julian shrugged. "He's your friend, not your boyfriend." "He's your brother, half-brother," he said, almost too quickly. "We didn't even grow up in the same house." I set my cup down. "That's not the point. If he finds out—" "He won't," Julian interrupted, "unless you tell him." I couldn't tell if it was arrogance or certainty in his voice. Maybe both. That afternoon was tense. Marcus wanted us all to go into town and grab supplies, so we piled into his truck. Julian sat in the back, quiet. I took the passenger seat, trying to pretend everything was normal. It wasn't. Marcus kept cracking jokes, complaining about the bugs, asking if we should grab burgers for dinner. He didn't notice the way my leg bounced, or how Julian's eyes lingered on me in the rearview mirror, or how I avoided looking at either of them too long. Back at the cabin, the tension kept building. By nightfall, Marcus was in bed early again, sunburned, exhausted, and totally clueless. Julian and I ended up outside by the lake, sitting on the old dock. The moon was bright enough to cast our shadows on the water, and the air was warm and still. He nudged me with his shoulder. "Tell me something real," I sighed. "I'm scared." He was quiet a moment. Of what? Of messing this up, of Marcus finding out, of wanting you this much. Julian turned to look at me, his profile lit in silver. I'm not trying to screw up your life, Chris. I like you. I've liked you for a while. My breath caught. You barely knew me, I said softly. I remembered everything about you, he said, from that one party. You were the only guy who actually talked to me, treated me like a person, not some awkward teenager. That stuck. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Julian's hand slid across the dock, fingers brushing mine, and I didn't pull away. I'll keep this quiet, he said. I'm not trying to blow things up, but I'm not going to pretend it's nothing either. I nodded slowly, and then, quietly, I said, come with me. We slipped back inside, careful not to wake Marcus. My door clicked softly shut behind us. No words, just slow, quiet, deliberate movement. Clothes peeled away. Hands memorizing skin. Breaths caught in throats. That night was different. It wasn't reckless, like before. It was intentional. Like we both understood exactly what this was and what it could become if we let it. When it was over, we lay there in silence. Julian's head on my shoulder, his fingers tracing light patterns on my chest. I should have felt guilty, but I didn't, not in that moment. All I felt was relief and a terrifying kind of happiness, because this wasn't just lust anymore, and I didn't know how to bury it. The next morning, everything felt different. Julian was gone when I woke up. No note, no sign he'd ever been there. My bed looked too neat, like he'd deliberately left no trace. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, the weight of the night still clinging to my skin. I'd crossed a line, and I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. By the time I got to the kitchen, Julian was out on the porch, shirtless, sipping a smoothie like he hadn't just completely rewired my entire life. Marcus was flipping pancakes at the stove, humming something off-key. Morning, Marcus said. You sleep in or pass out? Little of both, I said, pouring coffee and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Julian didn't say anything, just glanced at me once over the rim of his cup, eyes unreadable. We ate breakfast in silence. Too much silence. Halfway through his plate, Marcus leaned back in his chair and studied us. What's going on with you two? He asked casually. I nearly choked on my coffee. Julian didn't flinch. What do you mean? Marcus shrugged. I don't know. You're both acting weird. Did you argue or something? Julian glanced at me. I shook my head. Nope. Just tired. Marcus didn't look convinced. You sure? I know you both. And you're acting like two kids who got caught stealing from the cookie jar. I forced a laugh. We're fine, man. Julian chimed in. Maybe you're just reading into it because you're the only one who got a full night's sleep. Marcus rolled his eyes and went back to eating, but the suspicion didn't fully leave his face. The rest of the day was tense. Marcus dragged us out on the lake for a few hours. We paddled, swam, made jokes, but every moment felt like a performance. Julian kept his distance. I kept my mouth shut. Later that night, I was in my room when Julian knocked softly. I opened the door and pulled him inside before anyone could see. This is getting risky, I whispered. He kissed me before I could say anything else. I don't care, he murmured. Do you? I hesitated. I don't know, I said honestly. I care about you, but if Marcus finds out, Julian nodded slowly. Then we'll deal with it. We didn't talk after that, just let our bodies speak. Quiet, hungry, intimate. It was the way he touched me, looked at me, stayed with me afterward. The next morning, Marcus caught me in the hallway. Hey, he said, can we talk? My stomach dropped. Sure. He led me out to the dock, away from the cabin, away from Julian. The lake was still. Early morning fog curling over the surface. Marcus leaned on the railing and looked out at the water. "I'm not stupid, Chris." My heart stopped. He turned to face me. "I know something's going on. Maybe I don't know exactly what, but I can feel it." I swallowed. "Marcus, I'm not mad yet," he said. "But you've been off, both of you. And if something's happening, I think I deserve to know." I didn't respond. "Is it Julian?" he asked bluntly. I looked away. "I didn't plan it." He exhaled slowly. "But it's happening?" I nodded once. Marcus didn't yell, didn't even look surprised. Just rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "Jesus." "I didn't mean to lie," I said. "It just happened." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I need to think." And he walked back to the cabin, leaving me standing alone on the dock, unsure of what would happen next. Marcus didn't speak to me the rest of the day. He wasn't cold or cruel, just distant, quiet. He didn't slam doors or throw accusations. He just disappeared into the garage to fix something that didn't need fixing and barely made eye contact during dinner. Julian noticed. He kept glancing between us, jaw tight, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It finally did. Around 9 p.m., I was in the living room, scrolling aimlessly through a game on my phone when Marcus came in, stood in front of the TV and said, "We need to talk." All three of us. Julian and I exchanged a glance. My stomach flipped. We followed him to the porch, the air thick and still. The lake was dark now, nothing but reflections and silence. Marcus leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "I'm not going to make this into some dramatic family fight," he started. "But I need to know what's going on." Julian didn't hesitate. "I like him." Marcus stared at him. "You've known him for, what, a week?" Julian's voice was steady. "I've known of him for years." "And you think now's the right time to, what, hook up? Fall in love?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "I didn't plan it," Julian said. "Neither did he." Marcus looked at me. "You're my best friend. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know what it was," I said. "I still don't." He nodded slowly. "I'm not gonna lie. It feels like a betrayal. From both of you. Not because it's wrong, not because you're both guys, but because you kept it from me. You let me play third wheel in my own damn cabin." Julian flinched. "I needed time," I said quietly, "to figure it out." Marcus sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Look, I care about you, Chris. You're like a brother. And Julian, you're my actual brother. So I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't do." He paused, then added, "But this changes things." We stood there in silence for a minute, the weight of everything pressing down hard. "I'm going to head home early," Marcus finally said. "Let you two have space or whatever." "Marcus," Julian started. "It's not anger," Marcus said quickly. "It's just I need space too, to process." He turned to go, then looked back. "Just be honest with each other. And don't screw this up unless you're sure it's worth screwing up." With that, he walked back inside. Julian and I stayed out there for a while, the silence heavier now. "He's right," I finally said. Julian nodded. "He is." "So what now?" Julian reached for my hand. "Now we stop pretending this is temporary." I looked at him, really looked. And I knew. It wasn't just a summer thing. It was real. Messy, complicated, risky, but real. The next morning, Marcus packed up quietly. No guilt trips. No lingering glares. Just a couple nods. A "text me when you leave," and the sound of his truck disappearing down the road. The cabin felt too big without him. Julian and I sat on the porch after he left, coffee in hand, saying nothing for a long time. It wasn't awkward. It was just the first time we didn't have to hide. No more glancing over shoulders. No more rushing to separate beds at night. "I didn't think he'd take it like that," Julian said eventually. "Yeah," I said. "He's better than I am." "You're better than you think," Julian replied, bumping his knee against mine. It still didn't feel real. That I was here, with him, with nothing in our way but our own nerves. No pretending, no what-ifs. We spent the rest of the day doing nothing. Reading. Swimming. Lying in the sun like two people on the edge of something new and terrifying. That night, Julian crawled into my bed without saying a word. Just slid under the blanket, pressed his chest to my back, and wrapped an arm around me like he belonged there. And honestly, it felt like he did. He kissed the back of my neck, soft and slow. "Do you think this is gonna work?" he asked against my skin. I rolled over to face him. "I don't know, but I want it to." Julian looked at me like he was searching for cracks, waiting for me to flinch or run or say it was just a fling. Instead, I kissed him, not out of lust, not out of habit, just because it felt right. The next few days blurred together in the best way. We stopped trying to explain it. We stopped fighting it. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of doubt, of overthinking, of what the hell are we doing? But there were also long walks, tangled legs on the couch, kisses that lasted too long, and mornings that felt too short. Eventually, we left the cabin, packed up the leftover groceries, cleaned the grill, locked the front door like any two people heading home after vacation. Julian drove us back into the city, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my thigh. "You think he'll talk to us again?" he asked as we crossed the state line. "He will," I said, "eventually." "And if he doesn't?" I looked at him. "Then we'll figure that out too." Because the truth was, I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how we'd explain it to people, how we'd deal with the inevitable reactions, or how this would unfold in the real world. But I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't just a cabin thing. It wasn't just lust, it was him, it was me. And it was ours now.